DVD we're going to have a look at now is about Nunchaku. The Nunchaku I use are ones that I've made, and I made these some nearly 40 years ago. If you're interested in making some of these, I have my own Nunchaku website, so if you have a look at the screen, this will flash up on there and it will give you guidance on how to make your own Nunchaku. I'm going to start off with the basics of Nunchaku. When I'm doing this, I'm first of all just going to come into a ready position. You can stand in whatever position you like, but this is going to be a little bit easier for general practice. Holding the Nunchaku in my right hand, and I've got it held at just about its central grip. The first movement I want to do is a front crossover. On this, I'm bringing it up and just dropping it across my right arm, and you'll see that it's hanging down straight. My other arm just comes in front to catch this, so I bring it up and catch. Now I do recommend that you practice this quite a few times, but when you're doing this, it's important to try and get this elbow out to the side and not forward, because it makes it more difficult to raise and catch. So out to the side and catch. Once you get the general idea of this, you can let go of the top shaft, this one, swing around to the opposite side. So we go one side and then the other side. And all I'm doing is making nice smooth movements from one side to the other. Don't be tempted to rush these when you're doing your movements, because the faster you go, the harder it is to start off with. So just make nice small movements. Now what I can do with this as well is I can start to put some movement in this where I'm stepping forward. But when I step forward, this will be a strike. So I step moving in with it. So step forward and move back, step forward and move back and finish. Now having a look at a back crossover. On this I'm taking it so it goes across my back. Holding it in my right hand, I just turn slightly to the side. The turning action will allow for the weapon to flow through, and I'm bringing my other hand just towards the back so it just touches my kidney area. So I turn and catch, bring it back to catch. Again, practice this so you can just start to get that nice motion of movement through and catching it. Once you feel confident on one side, when you've turned, you can let go of the top shaft and turn around to the other side and catch. And then all you're having to do is repeat the movement from one side to the other side to the other side. A reverse back crossover. Now what I'm doing on this is I'm bringing my arm, and this is going to be my right arm, and it goes up over my left shoulder. But I do this when I swing the Nunchaku, and all I want to do is turn and catch it onto the side. Now when you're doing this, you need to tuck your shoulder right underneath your chin so you get a nice smooth movement to turn around with this. So I swing and turn. You'll also see that what I'm doing is I'm just turning my body with this because it allows it to flow. Sometimes when you're doing static movements, it's a little bit more difficult. Add this little turn, makes it a bit easier. Now once you've done one side on this, you can just swing the Nunchaku out and then come around and do the other side. Swing out and go from one side and then over to the other side. Then you can come back and finish. A neck crossover. There's two different ways of doing this one. The first one I'm doing is I'm crossing my arms over. Now to do this you need to swing the Nunchaku out in front of you and make a nice big circle. As you're bringing it over your shoulder, try and get the shaft just to come up by your ear. Alright? If you take it down too low, it just bounces off the other shoulder. So we bring it around and you'll see that it drops comfortably from one side to the other. As it comes around, I can just catch it. Now this is where my arms are crossed, so this is a neck crossover, arms crossed, and then I do it where I've got arms uncrossed. So crossed on one, uncrossed on the other. Crossed and uncrossed. You can do this where you're putting steps going in with your movement, because these will be big strikes coming out. So you come one, you can turn, two, turn around and around and around. So get used to movement when you're doing your Nunchaku practice. Don't keep standing still. You often find that as you turn with the Nunchaku, it works better for you. One of the common movements with a Nunchaku is doing a figure of eight. Now when I go to do this, I feed the weapon forward, and then all I do is just make a nice rotational movement. This rotation is done with the wrist and not the elbow. So that way I let it just flow around in a nice smooth action. When I want to stop this, I let it go down to the side, over, and catch it coming back. Just start it, bring it over to the side, in, and catch it back.
1, 2, 3.
A figure of 8 is taking it forward this way. Reverse figure of 8 is going back in the opposite direction. Now on this one, what I'm doing is I'm going over to my left shoulder and then to my right. The grip that you're using with this is a nice light grip between your thumb and first finger, and that's just the lower part of this. And you can see when I'm doing this, it looks a little bit like a backhand when you're playing tennis. To stop it, you can just bring it over, through, and catch. Now I'm going to show you how to do a bounce and catch. For this, I'm turning to the side, but as I turn to the side, I'm swinging the nunchaku so it's going from my right to my left, and then I just let it go with the left hand. It bounces off my back and comes back. So I bounce and catch it. I can take it over my head, let it slide, bounce and catch back. And all I'm doing now is moving from one side to the other side, and it becomes a nice smooth movement. When I've got it just above my head here, all I'm doing is I'm just sliding out, bounce, catch, over the head, bounce and catch. Now, using body movement with this is really essential to make sure that you get the swing and flow correct. The next movement is a little bit difficult. It's called a reverse front crossover, and I start this off from a figure of 8. Now I just get that figure of 8 going nice and smooth on it, and then all I want to do is I want to take it to my left side, hand comes up and catches it. Now each time you go from your figure of 8, if you get your hand into the same position each time, the nunchaku will come up and you can catch it exactly the same time. When I'm doing this, I let the shaft just go to the back of my tricep, up, and then I can catch it. So figure of 8, over and catch. I'll just show you from this side so you can see a different angle as I do my movement. I move over, catch and finish. Now when you're going to do this, you can practice this right and left. From a figure of 8, I want to show you an underarm catch, and that's all I'm doing is I go figure of 8, rotate to the side and catch. So figure of 8, drop it down to the side and catch it under your arm. The tension should be just in towards the cord of chain with this. So figure of 8, catch and down to the side. Figure of 8, catch and down. Reverse underarm catch. Now all I'm doing is I'm swinging it out first and then I'm just catching it underneath my arm. I can do this with the step as well so it flows through with the movement. So I step forward and catch it. If I turn off to this side, I step forward and catch. So swing. Now it really is important when you're doing this, don't try and do short movements. Nice big swing out, then catch it underneath your arm and finish. From the underarm catch, what I can do is I can turn my body, and all I'm doing is I'm twisting on the ball of my feet, and I let it go and catch it with the opposite hand, being my left hand. Take it under my arm, turn and catch. Under the arm, turn and catch. Under the arm, turn and catch. Learning how to bounce the nunchaku. Now this is really important when we're going through different techniques, and the bounce sometimes links one movement to another. And bouncing is just catching and bouncing. Now, as you do bounces, you can bounce them off various parts of your body. So at the moment, I'm just taking it high and low and using my palm. I can also bounce it where it comes across different parts of the body and to the outside of my legs. Right? When you're doing bounces, you can do a little bit more. You can bounce off your feet when you're coming around. Right? Now, although this looks showboaty, it does help in aligning up the techniques, so we can just bounce and then finish. I'm going to show you some of the basics of spinning, and the first one is going to be a very basic one, which is called a finger spin. Now, you start off figure of 8, and then let it spin through your fingers. Now all I'm doing is I'm just letting it rotate through the first and second finger, and then I bring it back into its normal cycle. When I'm finger spinning, it goes off to the side. So if I turn around this way, you'll be able to see it at a different angle. Finger spins and comes back. Over, finger spin, and just to finish, I can do an underarm catch. Learning how to do a hand spin. Now to start off with, you bring the shaft so it just goes over lines up with the little finger, and the cord or chain is just hanging over on this. I recommend that you pay close attention to the length of the cord or chain with this. As it sits on your hand, it should sit comfortably so it just rests over onto the hand. Anything shorter than this will flick it off when you're spinning. Anything longer will make it awkward to do a movement. The time you spend setting this up is well worth it, because then you'll be able to use this properly. Now, from this position, all I have to do is do a rotation around. Got this resting on the edge, a spin and over, spin and over, spin and over. And you again need to practice this time and again to get it right. Once you get the basic idea of spinning, we can take it a little bit further to where we're using bounces. And on this one, I'm just letting it touch the outside of my hip, and then I spin and bring it back. And I move it from one side to the other side as I'm doing this. Now, I recommend that you start learning how to maneuver your body around and about so you can get the spins coming in. So if I'm coming into a straddle stance, you can see that I can spin it through. It's also worth learning how to move with this so it starts to flow. Now, this is another little form of spinning, is where I bring it around the finger and then undo it. So it spins in and back, through, spin, wind and back, in, turn, unwind and back. Most of the hand spins that I've been showing you are going around your hand, so they just spin one way. What I want to do now is I want to take it in an opposite direction, so it goes across the back of my wrist and over. When I'm doing this, I'm just passing it so it wraps around the wrist area. So from a movement, I let it rotate in and around. Now when you're doing this, it does take some practice. You need to keep it so it flows smooth, so it goes around and back. Once you practice the basics, you learn how to link movements up. And the only way you can do this is start moving a little bit. So if I do a front crossover, turn around, neck crossover, bounce and catch over my head, I can now start to let the nunchaku float around and about. And all you're having to do now is I'm putting bounces in, I move with this, I can turn coming in, there's that reverse front crossover, I move through, in. If I want to put my bounces in off my feet, I can do, and then all we have to do, keep practicing to link them together. Looking at some basic blocks, what I've done is I've got a little routine that will work quite well. Now, I move in and I'm blocking, so I just move off to the side. I take it over my head, so I'm blocking one way, and then I'll move through and block. I bring it forward and around and then back. I also use this as a little routine to be able to warm my shoulders up, because there's a lot of work going in these. So I block 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and finish. Now I'm going to move on to 2 nunchaku. The first thing we're going to have a look at is a figure of 8 movement. Now all I'm doing is I'm just dropping them down at my side, take them over my arms, and you'll see that my elbows are pointing out at either side. And then I start doing a figure of 8 movement. Now I alternate between crossing left over and then right coming over. And that way you're not going to collide with your movements. So you just take it one way and the other, bring them around to the side, and you can get that underarm catch, but this time it's on a double basis. So I have figure of 8, underarm catch, figure of 8, underarm catch. From the basic figure of 8, what I can do now is when I'm going through with my movements, I can do finger spins with either hand. So all I'm doing is spinning around and back. I'm just putting a little bounce in just to keep the cycle going so that you can see what's going on. So finger spin, bounce, back into figure of 8, finger spin, bounce and back. If I turn off to the side, you'll see yet another angle of this. So in, around, finger spin to the side and catch. Figure of 8s go this way. Now I'm doing a reverse figure of 8 and I'm taking it outwards. And all I'm doing is crossing the arms over, but this time I don't alternate arms. So as I go to do my movements, I bring it over to the side. You can do little bounces to bring it back in, over and around. So now I can combine figure of 8 one way through and then figure of 8 the opposite way. Combining movements together, so I've got an underarm catch, and this is where I'm holding the nunchaku in my left, and then reverse underarm catch with the right. I do a spin and catch and bounce, and now I can take them from one side to the other, and then all I want to do is when I want to stop them is I go back to that catch position. So if I turn off to the side, I go one way, the other, around and catch, over, catch and back. This does take a little bit of practice because your hands are now doing different things at the same time. Doing hand spins with 2 nunchaku. I'm just going to come into a little bit of a straddle stance, bring them over my arm so I can bounce and catch them around. Now, you've got to keep moving when you're doing these movements, right? And all I'm doing is move around, catch, bounce and back. Over, bounce. When it's going into the bounce, it goes around your hands, back. To finish this off, I can bring them forward and I can just do a 2-finger catch, complete your movement nicely. Often when you're demonstrating with the nunchaku, what you want to be able to do is move from one nunchaku to another. So if I start a routine, I'm moving around and about and I'm setting myself up so as I go through for movements, I can draw the other one out and then get it to work in a nice fluid movement. To do this, I often use my waistband at the back of my belt and I point the nunchaku down. Don't have the cord pointing up on this, so you're pointing it down into this direction. So as I come around, I can draw it out and it comes out in a nice smooth action. Now again, all of this takes a little bit of practice, but perfection never comes on the first attempt. Doing nunchaku in a standing position is okay, but you also want to learn how to use it just off the floor a little bit. And for this, I'm coming down into a kneeling position. And I'm using the nunchaku so it just comes around. Now, at the moment, I've got my right leg forward, but when I want to change movements around, I drop knees down and change them up. You have to constantly think where your knees are in order to be able to swing the nunchaku around. Because otherwise, what you're going to do is you're going to get collisions. Right? So swinging around and you'll see that it flows through nice and easy. Using 2 nunchaku down on the floor. Now keeping still is fairly easy. So you can see at the moment my 2 knees are just planted down on the floor. But then when I want to move with this, I have to be able to swing the nunchaku and avoid contact with the knees. Now it does take a little bit of practice, but it's worth it in the long run. We've established that we can start using the nunchaku, and all I'm doing is I'm doing this in a standing position. I've also now established that I can drop down onto the floor and do this in a kneeling position. But what you want to also be able to do is to follow these movements down to where you can actually fight off the floor, and I'm doing figure of 8s, and then you want to work yourself so you're starting to get yourself back up, in and finish.